The narrow hallways of an aging apartment building in Brooklyn carried a weight of history. The cracked linoleum floors bore decades of footsteps, and the walls, yellowed with time, still carried the faint scent of old cooking grease and paint long past its prime. From behind the thin doors, the muffled sounds of life drifted through children's laughter, mixing with cries, the television static of neighbors trying to escape their worries, the occasional argument spilling into the corridor. It wasn't a glamorous place, not by any measure, but to the families who lived here, it was all they had. On the third floor, tucked into a small corner unit, lived the Johnson family. Marcus Johnson, a hard-working black mechanic in his late 30s, wore his years not in gray hairs but in his hands calloused, rough, and stained with oil that no soap could ever quite scrub away. His shoulders carried the weight of long days under the hood of broken cars, and his eyes, though tired, still held a quiet determination. His wife Angela balanced the scales of their survival with her own sacrifices. Gentle and soft-spoken, she worked nights cleaning offices in Manhattan, scrubbing the desks and windows of people who never even saw her. Her shifts ended when the city was just waking up, and many mornings she would slip home just in time to pack the kids off to school before collapsing into bed. Their children, David and Lily, were the light that pushed them forward. David, barely 10, was sharp-eyed and curious, with a love for drawing superheroes on scraps of paper. Lily, only 6, was full of questions about the world, her laugh a melody that often cut through the gloom of the apartment's peeling paint and buzzing radiator. Life was never easy for them. Every dollar stretched thin. Dinner often meant whatever could be bought cheapest at the corner store: rice, beans, maybe some chicken if Marcus got lucky with overtime. But they made those dinners more than meals. They made them moments. Laughter, stories, and whispered prayers that rent wouldn't rise again turned their small, time-stained apartment into a sanctuary of resilience. It was theirs, and they had fought too hard to keep it. But trouble had a face, and it wore a smug grin. Richard Harlow, the landlord. He was a tall man in his early 50s, always immaculately dressed in tailored suits that looked out of place in the worn-down building he owned. His gray hair was slicked back with expensive gel, his shoes polished to a shine that contrasted against the scuffed hallway floor. His cold blue eyes never looked at people, they looked through them, as if measuring their worth in dollars. To Harlow, tenants were not people, they were profits. And if you didn't fit the image he wanted for his building, you became a problem. And to Harlow, the Johnsons were exactly that. For weeks, he had harassed them. Not about late rent, Marcus had always paid on time, even if it meant going without something else. But Harlow didn't care about that. What he wanted was change: wealthier tenants, whiter tenants, faces that reflected him, not families like the Johnsons. That evening, tension boiled over. The building was unusually quiet when Harlow's heavy footsteps echoed up the stairs, each step sharp and deliberate, like a drumbeat of arrogance. Neighbors knew his stride. Doors shut quietly as he approached. His presence was a storm, and no one wanted to get caught in its path. He didn't knock. Instead, his fist thundered against the Johnsons' door, rattling it in its frame. Marcus opened it cautiously, sweat from a long day at the garage still glistening on his forehead. Before he could even speak, Harlow shoved his way inside, his cologne invading the small living room. Well, Marcus," Harlow drawled, stretching his words like poison. "Rent's due today, isn't it? Funny. Because I don't see the kind of people who can afford to live here." His eyes darted around the apartment, sneering at the second-hand furniture and the children's toys neatly stacked in the corner. Then, with a cruel smile, he added, "Maybe you and your kind would be better off back where you belong." Angela froze in the kitchen, instinctively clutching Lily's small hand. David, sitting cross-legged on the couch with his sketchpad, looked up, confusion and fear widening his young eyes. The tension in the room crackled like static. Marcus clenched his fists at his sides. His pride burned, but his fear for his family was stronger. In this city, a landlord's threat wasn't just words. It meant the possibility of eviction, of losing the only roof they had, of ending up on the streets. "We've always paid our rent, Mr. Harlow," Marcus said firmly, voice steady even though his chest tightened. "Don't talk down to my family." But Harlow smirked, taking a deliberate step closer, his voice rising so the neighbors could hear through the thin walls. "Don't talk down? You think you belong here? This building's not for people like you." I want tenants who make this place look respectable. Maybe I should throw you out right now." The words hung heavy. From behind doors, neighbors whispered. Some peeked through narrow cracks, their eyes filled with both fear and curiosity. For years they had watched Harlow's cruelty, endured his harassment, but no one had ever dared to confront him. Marcus's chest heaved. His instincts screamed to fight, but the power imbalance was real. Harlow wasn't just a man, he was their landlord. And landlords had the kind of power that could ruin lives overnight. And then, footsteps echoed from further down the hall. Slow. Steady. Jason Statham. He had been visiting a friend in the building, an old acquaintance from his film crew days. Dressed in a dark leather jacket over a fitted black shirt and jeans, he moved with the quiet authority of someone who had seen enough fights to know when one was worth stepping into. His sharp eyes caught the scene, the landlord towering over Marcus, Angela clutching her daughter, neighbors peeking in fear. It was enough. Enough. Jason's voice cut through the hallway like a blade, low and commanding, carrying the kind of weight that silenced the air. Harlow turned sharply, startled. "And who the hell are you?" he snapped, puffing himself up. Jason didn't flinch. His expression was calm, but his jaw was tight with quiet rage. He walked forward with deliberate steps until he stood shoulder to shoulder with Marcus. His presence alone shifted the energy in the room. "You think being a landlord gives you the right to humiliate families?" Jason asked, his voice steady, his piercing gaze never leaving Harlow. "To tear down people who are fighting every day to survive? Not on my watch." The hallway stirred. More doors creaked open. Tenants leaned out, their faces alive with curiosity and a spark of hope. For the first time, someone was standing up to Richard Harlow. Harlow scoffed, though his arrogance flickered. "This is none of your business. These people are tenants. I decide who stays and who goes." Jason stepped forward, closing the gap until his face was inches from Harlow's. His voice dropped, calm but deadly serious. "You don't decide who deserves respect. That's earned. And right now, you're showing the whole building exactly what kind of man you are. A coward." The word echoed like a slap. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Harlow's smugness snapped. Rage surged to cover fear. "You better watch your mouth," he hissed, shoving Jason's chest. "A mistake." In an instant, Jason's hand shot out. He grabbed Harlow's wrist, twisted it effortlessly, and slammed him against the wall. The landlord's cry of pain shattered his mask of control. Jason's strength was precise, controlled not an act of cruelty, but of dominance. Leaning in close, Jason's voice was a low growl, meant only for Harlow's ears. "You lay another hand on this family, or any tenant here, and I'll make sure you regret it." The hallway held its breath. Jason released him suddenly, shoving him back. Harlow stumbled, his face flushed red, his arrogance crumbling into humiliation. His eyes darted around, searching for support, but all he saw was disgust. Tenants who had once cowered now stood taller, their whispers turning into murmurs of approval. No one was on his side. Marcus stepped forward, placing a hand on Jason's shoulder. Gratitude welled in his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered, the words heavy with meaning. Jason gave a small nod, his voice steady. No man should have to fight for his family's dignity alone. Angela, tears in her eyes, hugged her children tightly. Lily buried her face in her mother's dress, while David looked at Jason as if he had just seen a real superhero step out of his drawings. The silence broke. Neighbors emerged from their apartments fully now, their voices rising with support. For the first time in years, the Johnsons and every tenant weren't alone. Red-faced and humiliated, Richard Harlow gathered what little pride he had left. He straightened his suit jacket, muttered something unintelligible, and stormed out of the building. His footsteps, once arrogant, now sounded hollow. And as Jason Statham walked calmly into the night, the Johnson family stood taller than before. Their dignity was intact. Their children's eyes shone not with fear, but with hope. Because justice had spoken not in promises, not in empty words, but in action.